They told me for years there was no money in podcasting. Well, they were all wrong.
I spent 12 years in Okinawa, which is the southern part of Japan. At the time, before I got there, the only thing I knew about Okinawa was the Karate Kid, because Mr. Miyagi is from there. And I was like, all right, I get to go to where Mr. Miyagi was. Right on. This is going to be cool. And it really was. I had a great time there. But I left Okinawa, moved up to Hokkaido, the northern part of Japan. And after just a year there, I settled in Kobe, which is where I've been since 2011.
All right. So you were only supposed to be there for 2 years. So what made you stay? Was it the job? Was it the food, the culture, a little bit of all? Like, what, just Canada sucks? Like, what made you stay for 23 plus years?
Be careful. No, actually, Canada is pretty awesome, except for lately it's been pretty crazy. But
I love Canada. Canada's a great spot.
Thank you very much. So I came out here and I was on something called the JET program, which is a program set up by the Japanese Ministry of Education. And at the time it was capped at 3 years. So you come out and it's a 1-year contract, renewable up to 2 times after that. And then after that, you're on your own. Either you find more employment in Japan or you go back home. And it's the Japan exchange teaching program. So it's meant to be an exchange. In other words, you're supposed to go back home and then tell your home country all about how awesome Japan is. Well, I thought Japan was so awesome that I just stayed. I did 2 years on the JET program, which was the original plan. And then I wanted to stay a bit longer. And I stayed a bit longer. I was going to stay for just 1 more year. And I liked it so much, I stayed for another year. And then after that, it just kept snowballing. And, the more I stayed, the more I just loved the culture. I just feel like it's a really comfortable place to live overall.
Yeah, I'm going to make my way over there for sure. I've been saying that for a while. I need to go to a lot of places around this world. But, I got to make money first. And I'm probably definitely going to be doing that tour, going to all those stadiums, because in your background you got the stadium of the Tigers. Now, how do you pronounce the actual full name of the team of the Tigers?
So the Tigers are the Hanshin Tigers, and Hanshin is actually the name of the company that owns the team. Most of the Japanese teams are given the name of the corporation that owns them, and so it's Hanshin Electrical Railways. I hope I got that exactly right, but anyways, it's a railway company, all right? And so the stadium is right along the Hanshin train line. And so the best way, pretty much the only way to get to the stadium, if you're coming from a little bit further away, is by train, by Hanshin Rail. And so they're taking your money with the ticket. They're also taking your money with the train ticket as well. But yeah, all the other teams in Nippon Professional Baseball are owned by some corporation, and that corporation's name is in the team name.
I did not know that. That's really interesting, because in the States, all the stadiums or arenas for sports are named after the corporation, like the Staples Center, Smoothie King Arena. Other than baseball, it's a little different. You got Wrigley, Fenway, Yankee Stadium. But that's interesting. That doesn't annoy me as much as I thought it would. Maybe because the name just rolls off the tongue. It's a great name for a baseball team. So what are the other teams in the division? Like, what are some of the other names in the league?
So in the Central League, which is what Hanshin is in, the main rival is the Yomiuri Giants. Mm-hmm. They're also sometimes just known as the Tokyo Giants, but Tokyo is not even part of their team name officially. So Yomiuri is a newspaper. It was at the time the largest newspaper in Japan. There's the Chunichi Dragons, who are also owned by a newspaper. There's the Yakult Swallows that are owned by like a kind of yogurt beverage company. The Yokohama DNA Bay Stars. So Yokohama is the city, and then DNA is like an internet company. And then finally, there's the Hiroshima Toyo Carp. They are owned by, Toyo is part of the name of Mazda. So they're owned by actually the Mazda car company.
Oh, that's cool. So how does that work in terms of contracts? Do they have, does the company own the name for like a set amount of time? They have to renew it? Or is it kind of like an in perpetuity thing? Like, what if the company goes out of business?
So it hasn't happened in recent years in Japan, but yeah, like sometimes companies will go out of business, or they just feel like it's not financially viable for them to hang on to the team anymore. So they'll find another corporation to sell it to. So one of the more recent sales was a supermarket chain called Daiei, which sold their team, the Hawks, to a internet or telecommunications company called SoftBank. That was in 2005. And so teams will sometimes change ownership, and people still want to kind of hang on to the old owner name, but eventually it just catches on that, I mean, most people that are fans of the Hawks know them as the SoftBank Hawks because they've been so for 17 years now.
That really threw me off. It's like, oh, I'm a big New York Yankees fan. It's like, well, now they're like the Syracuse Yankees. Ugh. Like, I don't know, but hey, I guess it works. So,
well, you get that on occasion in MLB too, right? Like the Angels have kind of fooled around with their name a little bit. They were the California Angels, and then now they're the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. And so
they were
you get a little bit of that.
The California Angels, the Anaheim Angels, now the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. That's just silly, but that's city to city, right? Like, they were the Washington Pilots, and now they were the Expos in Canada, and now they're the Washington Nationals, or however they switched. So cities are a bit different because, like, oh, I root for this team because it's my city. I don't root for corporations. I love Spotify, but I don't root for corporations. But it's like I root for the Tigers. So that it still works. That's just very. So
the interesting thing about that is that the Pacific League teams, which is the other league in NPB, every team except for one has got the city or the prefecture or the regional name within the team name as well. And a couple of the ones in the Central League do is also. But so there is definitely that local pride thing going on. And I mean, I definitely don't think that people are cheering for companies either. But when you look at like there's, the strongholds like the Yomiuri Giants and the Hanshin Tigers. I mean, they've been around for, since 1936. And they are probably not going to change their ownership anytime soon. The team name is such a strong brand that, that it's going to be there forever.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Now you can change the name on something. Like, I don't care if they change the TD Garden in Boston to whatever they want to call it. It's still the Fleet Center, right? Like there's some things instead the diehard fans they just don't care what you call it because they understand. Listen, it's just business. That's a business move. But you did mention the Tigers and like their history. So tell me about the Tigers as an organization, their history, when they were founded, how long they've been around it, some of the biggest successes, failures, curses, if any, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So tell me about the team you work for, man.
Sure. Okay. So the Tigers, the Hanshin Tigers have been around since 1935, December 1935. Wow. Their first season was 1936. And actually 1936 was the start of professional baseball in Japan. So they've essentially been around since the start. The very first pro team in Japan, at least that is still alive today, would be the Yomiuri Giants, who technically started in 1934. I don't know if you've heard about the Major League Barnstorming Tour that came over in 34 with Babe Ruth and a bunch of other famous names. But they were the team that faced that team. And the reason that they went pro, at least to my understanding, is that until this point, high school and college baseball was hugely popular in Japan. And there was no such thing as professional baseball. And people saw baseball as something that was so pure that you're not supposed to earn money playing it. It's a game. So you play it for the love of the game. You're not playing it for money. And once you're finished with college, well, that's kind of the end of your time playing baseball. Like, it's time to move on to adult things. But there was a rule, I guess, put in place, or I forget who exactly set this in place, but they said, you're not allowed to pay the players money to play baseball. But they also said that, you're not allowed to, this is what it was. You're not allowed to charge admission to these baseball games because it's not professional baseball. The players are not being paid. The fans or the people in attendance are not allowed to pay. But this barnstorming tour, which involves some great names, including Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Jimmy Fox, and others, cost Mr. Shoriki, who is the owner of the Yomiuri Giants, or the owner of Yomiuri newspaper, cost him so much money that he had to find a way to compensate that. And the way to do that was to charge admission to the games. But the only way to do that was to say that he had a professional baseball team, because if they were an amateur team, they weren't allowed to charge admission. And so they became the very first professional baseball team in Japan. The very next year, 1935, they actually did a tour of America. And it was during that time that a couple other teams were formed. So I totally sidetracked there. I'm sorry. I was supposed to talk about the Tigers. I ended up talking about the Giants.
No, that's awesome. You just gave me a history lesson of baseball in Japan, because I was, baseball's America's pastime. That's what it's known as, but it's huge in Japan. So no, that's totally relevant to the history of the Tigers, because in the 30s, that's how baseball. That was the prologue to my question. So Tigers, founded in 1935, were they a success right off the bat? Like, what's their championship history like? Let me kind of this. I asked through a lot actually. Let me specify. Like, how many championships they won? They a successful team. Like, if you can compare them historically to a baseball team, an American team, who they most compare to?
Unfortunately, like Red Sox or Chicago Cubs, they don't have a great track record. Now, so Japanese professional baseball started in 36, and until 1949, it was called Japanese Baseball League or Japanese Professional Baseball. Pardon me, I should know that. And then in 1950, it became NPB, which it is right now, two-league sport, Pacific League, Central League. So from 1936 through 1949, there were anywhere between 8 and 10 teams, I believe. And Hanshin was actually pretty successful during that time. But what happened was in 1950, when they split into two leagues, one of the main proponents of that was a guy named, his English name, I guess, was Henry Wakabayashi, Hawaiian-born Japanese ancestry. And he was part of the Hanshin Tigers. Well, he really strongly believed in the two-league system. He said, if you want baseball to grow, you need two leagues. You need to have like a World Series type of finale to the season. And so he really pushed hard for that. And he took a bunch of the Hanshin Tigers players, half-gutted the team to form a team that went to the Pacific League. And so from 1950 through 1961, Hanshin won nothing. It just took a long time to rebuild. They won the Central League in 62 and 64. Then they went on a 21-year drought. They won the whole thing in 1985. That includes the Japan Series. They have not won the Japan Series since 1985, and they've only won the Central League twice since then, in 03 and 05.
Hey, man, not every team can be the Yankees.
No, that would be the Giants' role in Japan. The Yomiuri Giants are the Yankees of Japan. Everybody knows that.
Well, how's the fan base like? Because you're comparing them to the Sox and the Cubs, which, hey, like, I'm a Yankee fan, but I give respect to the Red Sox as being one of the original baseball teams ever, along with the Cubs and the Reds. So, but that has a dedicated fan base. How dedicated is the fan base of the Tigers?
That I would say that probably Hanshin is very comparable to either of those teams in that respect as well. Despite the fact that they don't win a lot, they are probably the most followed and adored team in all of Japan. And that would include, I would say it includes the Yomiuri Giants. Now, I don't know if this is the case so much in America, but I would say so the Giants were kind of everybody's default team. You know, they were the first team, they were the most successful team. And when TV broadcasting started, the Giants were the ones that got all their games on TV. So by default, they became, the most popular team in the nation. However, if you want to look at the most popular team in terms of a fanatic fan base, I would say that Hanshin is number one in Japan, second to none.
All right. Fair enough. Any players from the Tigers ever make it to the States?
In the past, yes. So nobody of great consequence, I would say, or nobody that anyone would say, oh yeah, he was awesome. But Tsuyoshi Shinjo, he played for the Mets and the San Francisco Giants in the early 21st century. And then Kei Igawa, who played for your Yankees.
I know Kei Igawa. Yep.
Yeah.
I remember him. He didn't do too well, but I remember him.
No, he sure didn't. And then there have been a couple of others. Kyuji Fujikawa, who played for the Cubs and then a little bit with the Rangers before he came back to Hanshin. Those are kind of the main three, I think. That there was also a guy named, Keiichi Yabu, who played for the San Francisco Giants. So those are the four Japanese guys that came from the Tigers into MLB.
Hey, man. Still counts for something, Shout out to Kei Igawa. All right, wherever he is in the world. Shout out to Kei Igawa. Not your fault, Kei. I'm not going to blame you on that one. So you're a writer for the Tigers. What kind of stories do you cover? Do you cover the teams, like the team specifically? Do you interview the players? So tell me about how you cover the team you're writing, and does that also involve your podcast?
Yeah, good question. So it's kind of a bit of a complex equation, if you will, because I'm not employed by the Hanshin Tigers. I'm not technically even on staff at Daily Sports. I've got a monthly column, and the angle that they want me to take, because the Tigers are a very staunchly old-fashioned Japanese team with probably a 99.5% Japanese fan base. they want to see, well, what do foreigners think about the Hanshin Tigers or about different aspects of Japanese baseball? So it's basically like an outsider's look at our Japanese team is kind of what they've got me writing about. And so I write once a month. I try to find some kind of theme or topic. They don't give me access to the players, but I've been able to make connections with especially some of the non-Japanese players. So I've been able to interview them for my podcast and for my own personal stuff, but I'm actually not even allowed to use those interviews in my column, because here in Japan, the newspapers actually have to pay some royalties to the team in order to interview the players. And so I'm not paying, and so I'm not allowed to use it in the newspaper.
That's fascinating. Well, I can say you're living a dream of mine. I always wanted to cover baseball in some way, shape, or form, writing, audio, video, one way or the other. So this is the closest I can get for now. But definitely jealous. So when you write the articles, do you write them in English or in Japanese, or how does that work? Like, do you know how to write and speak in Japanese?
Yeah. So actually, I write the articles are published in Japanese, right, and I write them in Japanese.
Okay.
But often what I do is I think of a topic that I find interesting. I don't know if you would necessarily say as a foreigner to Japanese people, but I'll find something that I find interesting. So just an example, the last article I wrote was about how the players' names are spelled on the back of their uniforms. So you know Shohei Ohtani, right? His name is spelled Ohtani. Yep. Well, the H is silent, correct? It's not Ohtani, it's Ohtani.
Ohtani,
right?
Yep.
So why is the H there? Well, it's because it's a long O in Japanese. And some players, like, do you know Tsutsugo, who plays for the Pirates, I guess now? Yoshi Tsutsugo.
No, I do not. I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries. So he came over a few years ago. He signed with the Rays, didn't do very well, went over to the Dodgers, didn't do so well. Now he's with the Pirates. He kind of found a place in their system. Well, anyhow, when he was in Japan, had an H at the end of his name because it's a long O. But it looked like Tsutsugo, right? Mm-hmm. But anyways, he took it off when he came to America, so there's no H. And so my article was, why do they bother with the H? And I take that article, and for an English-speaking audience, I'm explaining maybe the phonetics or how the Japanese language works, because I'm assuming that a lot of my readers in English don't know that. Well, I can't just translate that into Japanese and use it for a Japanese audience, because they'll be like, who do you think is reading this? Like a first grader? Like, everyone knows it.
Yeah.
So I have to change it up a little bit and give it a different angle in Japanese. But so I write the article in English, and then I think, okay, well, how does this apply to a Japanese audience, or vice versa? I think of it, with my Japanese audience in mind, and then I say, but how do I make this more palatable to somebody who has a background in Major League Baseball, for example?
Right. That's a great topic. That's a great thing to write about, because that's something I would never think of, but I would see that and go, why do they do that? And I would read it and I go, wow, that's really cool. So what other topics have you written about and come up with? Like some of your favorite, give me like 3 or 5.
Oh man. Okay. So I've been doing this column in the paper for 4 years now. So wow, what are my 3 or 5 favorites? I kind of forget from month to month what I've written about.
That's fair.
So
I feel that.
Yeah, but just kind of a side story. One time I actually did write specifically about a player and maybe his style of play or something. And my boss actually said, well, we kind of don't want to use that because it doesn't fit with what the column is supposed to be about. So that was one that I was kind of a little bit shocked about. So here's a couple examples then of ones that I really liked. One was, so last year, the Tigers had a really hot rookie named Sato. And there's talk that eventually he may end up going over to the majors and hopefully he'll be successful. But the hype surrounding this guy really reminded me of the hype surrounding a hockey player that I grew up admiring when I was in my high school years, named Teemu Selanne, who played for the Winnipeg Jets and scored 76 goals in his rookie season and was just the talk of not only the town, but the whole league. And I kind of felt like Sato brought that same excitement. And so I wanted to kind of tie those two together in an article. And I thought that was kind of interesting, both for Japanese and for non-Japanese.
Yeah, I don't know this, but I'm assuming hockey isn't the most popular in Japan.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely not.
So that definitely ties to, well, even in the States, hockey is pretty popular. Hockey is very niche in the States. People who love hockey, they love hockey. They adore hockey. People don't care about hockey. It's like, yeah, hockey. Me, never played hockey, know how to skate, don't know how the game works. But someone's like, Will, do you want to go to the Rangers or the Bruins or whoever? I'm there. It's a live hockey game. Oh my God. It's some of the most fun I've ever had in my life.
It's awesome. It's awesome. I love hockey. And so I try to tie in some of my background into my writing. And as I said, they want to know what the outsider thinks about their team. And it's like, well, I automatically have to tie it to my background. But, it's funny because I'll read the comments on my articles, and sometimes I have to cringe as I'm reading them because sometimes they'll jab at my Japanese ability, like, well, this guy's writing ability sucks. And sometimes they'll be like, who cares about hockey anyways? Why is this guy writing about hockey? And there's quite a bit of negativity out there, but I just keep pushing through just because I'm having fun. I'm getting paid for it. And, who cares what you think, except that I care enough to read it. So
that's the internet. The internet, there's going to be hate and anger and despair all over the internet, no matter where you go. A wise man once said, post it and ghost it. Just post it. Don't look at it again. It's gone. Yeah. It's out there. It's done. But some people like the comments. I like reading comments, and because sometimes I can learn a thing or two. Yeah. But there's some, like, I remember me and my friend Nash used to do a American politics podcast, which can't do that anymore. Can't do it anymore. We just can't do it anymore. I can't run a business and do a political podcast. Like, you can't. Those two things can't exist in the same world. But someone put a comment where, like, clearly one is smarter than the other one. It's not the one who's really loud, like hinting at me. Now I was just like, yo, Nash, check out this comment, because it's, one, hilarious. I think it's going to get on my skin, but two, it's 100% right. That's the point of the show. I'm the loud guy who presents the story. Nash is the smart one who explains it. Like, they're like, yes, you nailed it. So it's like, yeah, they're supposed to be a dig at me, but I was like, no, nail on the head. Nailed it. Hilarious.
Nice.
All right. So that's my little journey off the beaten path. So let's talk some baseball, a little more about baseball.
Sure, man.
So how did you become a fan of baseball? Everyone has that story of, my dad is the one who grew me up to be a Yankee fan in Boston, right? You can imagine how tough that was. So who was the person in your life that made you fall in love with baseball?
Okay, so growing up in Canada, there's not like a huge baseball following, particularly in Winnipeg, where, well, we do have a pro team, but it's in one of the independent leagues, the Winnipeg Gold Eyes. Shout out to the Goldies. But I didn't grow up watching them. I guess, like, by default, the Blue Jays were kind of my team, but much like a lot of Canada, we kind of just we clued in during the playoffs, if there were playoffs for the Blue Jays or the Expos. But the Blue Jays, when they went on that back-to-back World Series run, was when I kind of, like, first started to actually care a little bit about baseball. But then, honestly, it was fantasy baseball that got me. It was my gateway into being interested in baseball.
Oh, that's awesome. It was Joe Carter, right? Hit the walk-off home run?
Yes.
92? Yep.
That one, I believe, was 93.
93.
If I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
I was close. I'll never forget. I wasn't alive.
92, 93. Yeah.
I wasn't alive in 93, but I've seen that home run so many times. And I was like, man, that's the childhood dream. So interesting. Fantasy baseball got you into baseball.
Yep. So, and actually, like, I only did 1 year of fantasy in Canada, and then I moved out to Japan, and it was another Canadian that was living in Okinawa, of all places, where there is no pro baseball, even in Japan. But he was doing MLB fantasy baseball, and he said, hey, Trevor, you got to join me in this. And I said, I don't even know baseball. Like, I don't know any of these guys. And he said, okay, I'll give you like a 4-month buffer where I'll give you advice on who to pick up, who to drop, all that kind of stuff. And after that, you're on your own. I got hooked, man. I just loved playing fantasy baseball, and I did it for like at least a decade after that, maybe even more.
Well, fantasy baseball, okay, this is a little bit of a sidebar too. Fantasy baseball is literally like the reason why, like, DraftKings is even a company to begin with. Like, how sports gambling is so big in this country. And let me explain. Have you ever seen the ESPN 30 for 30 on fantasy baseball? It's like one of the first 30 for 30s they ever did.
I haven't seen that one. No.
So find it. It's incredible because it tells a story about how these 4 nerds just literally did fantasy baseball, like, by hand, all the stats, the point systems. Now you go on to Yahoo or ESPN, it's easy. They did it by hands, and it really took off because they put money on it. right? And then that turned to fantasy football, that turned to fantasy basketball, and then fantasy football turned into like, oh, DraftKings, like, oh, you can just put bets on what's going to happen, and then you'll pick teams, parlays, all this stuff. So yeah, fantasy baseball. I love that you got into baseball through fantasy baseball, because I really followed baseball really heavily in middle school through fantasy baseball. Like, I've been a Yankee fan my whole life, big baseball fan my whole life, but fantasy baseball was also something for me that kind of took it to the next level. It let me know who these like B-list players on other teams were, because you pick them up for a week in fantasy because they're going 4 for 10 in like in the past 2 games. So that's crazy. What was fantasy baseball like when you started? Was it on a computer, or was it kind of like old school?
Yeah, my very first one, like in Canada, before I got into it over in Japan, was it was on paper. So it was pre-internet, or right in the infancy of internet. And so I don't even know if there was a good fantasy baseball option on the net. But then when I got to Okinawa, I think it was in the year 2000, was my first kind of foray into fantasy baseball again. And that one was Yahoo. So I just stuck with Yahoo for pretty much like from then until I think 2015 was the last year that I did it.
Yeah, Yahoo's great. I like Yahoo fantasy baseball. I haven't done it since high school. It's hard to get a group of people nowadays, especially amongst my friends. All my friends hate baseball. So it's just like me and like 3 other guys. So it's like we can't really form a league around that. I don't want to do it with randos. But fantasy football every year, $100. Here you go. I'm gonna lose. But whatever. So we're gonna do a little bit of rapid fire here.
Sure.
Favorite team all time and currently. We'll do MLB and Japan. I don't know if Japan's gonna be the Tigers, clearly, but like MLB.
Okay, so MLB, favorite team of all time. Well, I would say like probably not even the Blue Jays, even though they are a Canadian team. I don't know if you're aware of this, or if there is such a thing in America where there's this kind of like anti-New York sentiment amongst people who are non-New Yorkers. Well, there's a big anti-Toronto sentiment amongst most Canadians who are not in that region. And so Toronto was the team simply because they were the only Canadian team. But before that, it was the Expos. But I would say the team that I kind of followed or cheered for silently would be the Minnesota Twins, because geographically they lined right up with us. They were just south of us. And so that was my team.
All right. Great organization.
Puckett, Kent Herbeck, Dan Gladden, all that.
Herman Killebrew, was he on the Twins?
He was, but I think that was before my time.
Okay, fair enough. Hey, Twins, they were good in the 90s, early 90s. They won the 91 World Series?
91, and I think 87 as well. They won. So, yeah.
Man, I can't believe I just pulled that out of my ass. The 91 World Series was the Twins. That was like an educated guess on my part.
Good job. Good job.
Do you still follow Twins? Twins still your favorite team currently? Like favorite team to watch in MLB?
You know what, truth be told, I don't watch a lot of MLB simply because of the time zone difference and my schedule, because the games are on like mid-morning here. So if I'm not at work, I'm usually at home with the kids. But and then the other thing is, because I don't actually have the MLB channel, I would be relying on Japanese TV, and they'll broadcast games that feature Japanese players. And so right now, Kenta Maeda is with the Twins. So we'll get the occasional Twins game, but obviously, you know that they're going to show more Shohei Ohtani than anybody else. And so,
he's a phenom.
I mean, I still like the Twins. I'll still look at how they're doing the standings and stuff like that. But just the opportunity to watch them is not there.
They're not a bad club, man. They had some pieces. This Achilles heel is every time they make the playoffs, they play the Yankees. That's just how it's been for like the past 10 years. And anytime they make the playoffs, they play the Yankees and they lose in 4. That's just how it works.
And it's crazy. It doesn't matter how good the Twins are that year, how bad the Yankees are. It's almost like, well, when you see those names lined up together, you just know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah. It's honestly, the Red Sox have the same thing with the Angels. When the Red Sox were on their tear in the early 2000s up until like 2011-ish, like I'd say they're playing the Angels in the ALDS, and Sox are going on. They're playing the Yankees. Nail biter. They're playing the Indians. Well, who knows what's going to happen, right? And then they end up winning the World Series. And I have to go to high school. I have to go to school the next day. It's terrible. So favorite player, all time and currently, American and Japanese.
Oh man. Well, for Japanese players, can I pick 2 for all time even?
Of course.
Okay. So Ichiro is one that, like, I don't know how you can not like that guy, you know, both as a player and just as an individual. Just such a unique guy in all facets of, his personality, his approach to the game, all that kind of stuff. Love Ichiro. And then, of course, Ohtani. He's very different from Ichiro as far as personality and just makeup and playing style and everything. But how can you not be attracted to that guy? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
definitely. No. I would say Ohtani would be one of my tops.
Yeah, me and Phil talked about Ohtani extensively on our previous podcast. We talked a segment about like him being the face of baseball. And it's like, yeah, no, he is the face of baseball. He's on the cover of MLB The Show, which is coming out probably around the time this podcast is being released. So you can listen to this podcast while playing the game. I'm going to be playing on my Switch. I'm very excited.
Awesome.
Yeah, he's incredible. And he's doing something that hasn't been done in 100 years, which is unbelievable. So I'm excited to see him continue growing as a player. I'm excited to see how long he continue to keep up pitching and hitting, because I don't think he's going to be doing that for much longer. Personally, I hope he does, but I just don't see it being plausible.
It's really hard to predict what's going to happen there, but honestly, yeah, he's determined to do it. He's dedicated to it, where like, I don't know Babe Ruth's history or anything like that very well, but I don't know how dedicated he was to keeping himself in good physical shape, or how, insistent he was that he wanted to do both. But, with Ohtani, I think the drive is there, and that's a really big part of it. He lives, breathes, eats, sleeps baseball. And so whatever it takes, he'll make all sacrifices to make sure that he can do that. And so I'm looking forward, just like you, to seeing how long he can do that.
Personally, I'm banking on a solid 5 years. I think if he can do it for another 5 years, it's going to be phenomenal, and you have to pick one or the other. I'm not questioning his character or his fortitude. I'm questioning the fact that his body is eventually going to give out. It's a very different game today. It's more physical, it's more athletic, and the talent is way different than the game was that long ago. Then again, pitchers back then pitched every 3 days, sometimes every other day. So people back then were a lot crazier too. So I don't know. We'll see. I love Shohei Ohtani. I think he's great for baseball. He's great for the sport. And he's fun to watch, which is the most important thing. He's fun to watch. So give me your fondest baseball memory as a player, fan, however you want to describe it.
So I've got a couple of, I guess, baseball memories from watching the game from the stands. And one of them would be actually, I think it was like my third ever MLB game at the Sky Dome, which is called the Rogers Center now, or have they changed it again? I'm not sure.
Twins. Yeah, that was Sky Dome.
Yeah. So it was the Blue Jays against the Indians. And I remember I was at the game. It was an extra innings, John Olerud walk-off home run. And we were actually up in like box seats, and it was just like super exciting. I got so excited. I jumped up and I slammed my hands down on my buddies' backs, and one of them was scared. He said, I felt like you were going to push me over the edge. And so that was a great game. It was unbelievable.
John Olerud, that is a name I haven't heard in I don't know how long. He used to wear the helmet in the field. Yep. Utility man. He could play everything. First, second, third, short, outfield, wherever you need him to be, he could be. He was on the Yankees too.
Was he? I'd forgotten about that. I kind of choose to forget stuff like that. But
he was a utility man for the Yankees in the mid-2000s. Shout out to John Olerud, wherever he is on the world. John Olerud. Love it. Yeah, that's a great memory.
So that's from North America, and then in Japan, I've been to a couple of really good games. Well, more than a couple at Koshien Stadium, which is in my background right now, home of the Hanshin Tigers. But the most unforgettable would be the time that I saw them go from down 9-0 to winning the game 12-9. That was just unforgettable experience.
Do you remember what inning they were down 9-0 in?
Yeah. So it was against the Hiroshima Carp. It was they scored their 9th run in the top of the 5th.
Okay, so what halftime?
And then the Tigers got one in the bottom of the 5th, and then in the 6th and 7th is when they really rallied for just a boatload of runs.
Let's think about baseball, man. That's why baseball is different from every other sport. One, because the defense has the ball, right? That doesn't happen in any other sport. But two, you always have a fighting chance. Like, you as a defense have to finish the game, whether it's on the field or at bat. You have to finish the game. It's not like football. You can run the clock, or overtime rules where you score a touchdown, you don't get a chance to get the ball back with a coin toss. Right? Or basketball, Michael Jordan say never lost a game, he just ran out of time. Baseball is no. You're putting him away. Doesn't matter if it's 14-0 or 16-14. Like, that's just the beauty of baseball to me.
Yeah, you're still gonna get X number of at bats. So yeah, there's no such thing as, well, there is momentum, but not in the sense that you literally get no chances. You're always going to get that chance. Yeah. So I was actually sitting in with some visiting fans. There's kind of like a visiting fan section. I was kind of surrounded by fans of the visiting team. So I was kind of jeering my own team. I was kind of yelling out at them. I was like, "Give me my money back," stuff like that. And then when the Tigers got their first run, the fans around me kind of cheered with me. They're like, "Oh, good for you. Congratulations. You got a run." But by the end of the game, man, they were just stone silent. It was such a thing of beauty.
Yeah, nothing's better than seeing, like, being at a home stadium and you're the visiting team, and as something happens, you see the whole stadium just go. You can hear a pin drop. It is. And also on the flip side, being that visiting team, like I remember like one time in high school, like I was just having a really bad week, just feeling this really shitty. But I had Yankee tickets, or Sox Yankee tickets in Fenway. And like I was supposed to go with someone, but he couldn't go last minute for some reason. He couldn't go. So my dad was like, "Let's go." Me and him. So me and my dad went. And Yankees had a lead going into the ninth. And this was like a September game. Yankees weren't making the playoffs. Sox were already in. It didn't even matter. But, you know, we were first baseline under the grandstand, really great seats. And the Sox walk it off in the 10th. And me and my dad are sitting there just head down. The stadium's going crazy. Oh, like crazy. Stadium shaking. Because Fenway shakes. Fenway's an old building. Like you hear the people above you stomping on the grandstand, like, you know, piece of paint falling down your face, like people going nuts. And, you know, as much as I hated it, you look around and go, shit, man, this is pretty cool. it's still pretty cool seeing 40,000 people lose their mind. Cause, you know, I hate Red Sox fans. I hate them to my core, but they're dedicated and they love the game. They love their team. So the deep part of that core, there's a lot of respect.
Yeah, you got to give props to the fans that, you know, they're not fair weather. You know, they follow the team, you know, win or lose. And I love that as well. I love that about the Hanshin Tigers. I mean, the fans are just core. As I said, like they went through a really dry spell without anything to cheer for. I mean, there was a 17-year spell where they finished in last place in 10 of those 17 years, but the fans just kept on coming.
Yeah, I tell this to a lot of people too. They're like, when it comes playoff baseball time, I kind of like root for everybody because, like, you know, I like all the teams. It's like, well, yeah, I'm a Yankee fan, right? They're like, well, why don't the Rays win the World Series or your division? It's because the Rays are a great team. They're a young team. They don't have a big budget. You know, they are everything that's right with the state of baseball. They do it correctly. I want them to succeed because above being a Yankee fan, I'm a baseball fan. I love baseball. Also, fuck the Dodgers. So that's just how it works. So speaking of ballparks, you got a beautiful one behind you. Favorite ballpark of all time, American and Japanese?
Well, the Japanese one is right behind me. I mean, there's no, it's the king. I mean, it's the oldest ballpark in Japan, built in 1924. We haven't touched on this, and I don't know if we want to sidetrack, but there's an awesome high school baseball tournament every year, national tournament held at this stadium, actually both in the summer and in the spring. But that was the purpose of this stadium being built, was to host the National High School Baseball Tournament, which, as I said earlier, amateur baseball came before pro baseball in Japan and was, and arguably still is, more popular. So this stadium, man, I don't know if you can see it a little bit there, but it's an all dirt infield.
I was just gonna ask that. I was like, is that all dirt? That's very interesting. Never seen that before.
Yeah, well, you know, all the stadiums used to be all dirt. But every single other stadium in Japan has kind of modernized itself, if you will, I guess, with budget and stuff like that, right? Like in the early days, there wasn't a lot of money when it came to building the stadiums and maintaining them and stuff. But because this is such an iconic ballpark, and the high school kids all play on all dirt infields wherever they're playing all across the nation. And so it's not to replicate what they're used to, but it's because it's so iconic now. I mean, every kid dreams of playing at Koshien Stadium. So they're keeping it the same. There's no way they're ever going to make it a grass infield, ever.
Honestly, so I love it. I love it. Don't do it. It's old school. It's different. It's unique. Don't fix what doesn't need fixing.
Yeah, yeah. And you don't have to be like everybody else. That's for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
So, and that's true in baseball and in life anyways. So favorite ballpark in North America or in the world? I haven't been to a ton, but I definitely I enjoyed Safeco when I was there. I could probably list you on one hand though the stadiums that I've been to in North America. So there's not a lot to choose from, but Safeco was a good experience for me. I want to get out to, as many MLB stadiums as I can though someday.
Yeah, no, me as well. Me as well. So that's a good segue to the tour you do. So tell me about the tour. Goes around the Japanese ballparks. Like how close are they in proximity to each other? Because obviously Japan's one island, two islands, few islands.
It's four main islands, and there's ballparks on 3 of the 4.
Okay.
So there are 12 NPB teams. 5 of them are located in the greater Tokyo region. And so you can see almost half of the ballparks just probably they're all within an hour of central Tokyo. So that's kind of, I guess, good in a sense. And actually recently this tour has opened up just a Tokyo only option, I guess, if you will. So originally this started in 1999, and they had originally set it into 3 kind of sets. There was the main tour, the See It More, and the See It All. And so you can imagine what that means, but the main tour was 6 ballparks, See It More was 9, and See It All was 12. And so you're starting in Tokyo, generally speaking, and then you're making your way around Japan, going to 1 home game at each of the teams' home ballparks. And, there's a few days off in the middle where you can go check out sumo or whatever you want to do. Like if you want to check out some other aspect of Japanese culture, there's time to do that as well. But the main focus of the tour is baseball. And so the operator of the tour is American and living in America. And so he's coming over here. But then I kind of got hooked up with them when I one time offered my services, and they said no thanks, but then they had an extra ticket to the game because somebody was sick or somebody bailed on the tour or whatever. So I went along with them, and the operator of the tour, I didn't realize this, but he was kind of putting me to the test. He just said do you want to join us? And I basically I kind of guided them to the park. And then during the game, they just asked me questions about what's going on. Who is that guy? Or why do they do this? Why do they do that? How come Japanese baseball has this? And I answered every question, I guess, just because of my knowledge and interest in the game. And afterwards, he was like, man, do you realize you're exactly what we need? And so now whenever they come to Japan, I generally just stick to my area, my part of Japan. But when they come through my region, I'm kind of the local guide for them. So it's a lot of fun. It's a really cool tour. And Will, man, you need to join it sometime for sure.
I will, 100%. Because that sounds absolutely incredible. Literally, I'm going to get up once we got this call, I'm going to call my Freddie Rankin and be like, yo, save up for Japan. Because one day we're going. Do you see mostly tourists on this tour, or is a lot of I guess Japanese, I want to say Japanese families, because that's a great vacation to do. If someone's a Japanese family, I think their kids love baseball, you just go around tour, all different stadiums, or is it more tourism?
It's all tourism, actually. I don't know if I've ever seen a local Japanese person join the tour.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's almost exclusively people living in America. Occasionally we'll get people joining from other parts of maybe Southeast Asia or other countries, but it's generally speaking America, Canada.
All right. That's really cool. That's unexpected, but really cool. But hey, in this podcast, I learned to expect the unexpected. All right. Let's talk a little Baseball Hall of Fame. Phil and I talked a little about the Hall of Fame and some controversies. Well, the voting took place for 2022, and the controversy sparked up once again. So the Hall of Fame process, a little refresher for everybody. So each voting cycle, qualified members of the BBWA, I guess the Baseball Writers Association of America, I'm assuming, name no more than 10 eligible players for whom they consider worthy of Hall of Fame honors. To be enshrined, a player must be named for at least 75% of the votes ballots. Currently, players are removed from the ballot if they are named on fewer than 5% of ballots or been on the ballot for 10 times without election. So that whole process, a little convoluted, but what do you think of the actual voting process and who gets to vote for the Hall of Fame?
So, we said earlier, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. But I think this is broken and it needs fixing.
Mm-hmm.
I have respect for the writers who are doing the voting simply because I think they watch the game a lot more carefully than anybody else does. However, I don't know. They get 100% of the say. Is that right?
Yes. They only they vote. So no players, no MLBPA, the Players Association, no nothing. It's just the writers.
Right. I think that needs to change, and I don't have the solution, but like maybe there needs to be a percentage that is former baseball players, particularly. I don't know if it would have to necessarily be guys that are already in the hall, but I think that makes more sense than opening it to anybody. And then maybe even, I don't know about managers, but somebody that's actually in the game. You know what I mean? Like actually watching the players on the field, things like that.
Yeah.
So I think there's room for improvement in that. And then they reduced the number from 15 to 10. Is that right? Like 10 years on the ballot, and then you're done. It used to be 15.
I believe it was 2015. I had the stat, but I got rid of it because I didn't think it was relevant. So silly me. But yeah, it used to be 15. I believe in 2015, 2016, or 2018, they reduced it to 10.
And so like you look at guys like Bonds and Clemens, who now are no longer eligible. And I think like if it had been stretched out to 15, they would have made it in ultimately, but now they're, they find themselves on the outside looking in. So was that the correct decision? Why did they reduce it from 15 to 10? Was there some logic to that, or do you know?
I have no idea. I wasn't 100% sure it was 10. I got this readout from Baseball Almanac, which is my number one spot for baseball statistics and analytics. But I don't know why they did it. I'm not going to put my conspiratory hat on and say it's because of Bonds and Schilling and all of them. I think they just figured it was just a well-rounded number. The Hall of Fame is easily the most prestigious Hall of Fame in sports, the Baseball Hall of Fame, like easily, no questions asked. So maybe it was my best guess. They probably did this to keep up the honor, because the Baseball Hall of Fame, it should be hard to get in. There's a lot of people on the belt next year. I'm like, listen, Torrey Hunter, I love you as a player. You're not a Hall of Famer. I'm sorry.
He's Hall of Great. He's not Hall of Fame, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he was an outstanding player for a number of years, but I would not say that he's a Hall of Famer either. I agree with you on that. And maybe that's one of the reasons they dropped it to 10 is because, well, if you can't get in 10, then maybe you weren't meant to get in at all. Because we've seen guys squeak in year, 13, 14, or 15, where it's like, well, you're kind of borderline, and I don't know. There was, I forget the guy's name. Is it Ryan Thibodeau? Who basically talked so much about, was it Larry Walker? Or there are a few guys that he just talked about so much on social media that it kind of rallied the troops and got this guy into the Hall of Fame. And I love Larry Walker.
I was surprised Larry Walker got in, to be honest. I looked at his stats and I was like, okay, fine. The past few years, I do think people did kind of eke in, even if they got bigger numbers. But last year, no one got in, 0, right, which is surprising. But that's the way that is. The thing that irks me with the system is the fact that only writers get to vote. I think now the MLBPA, I don't know if that's all players or former players, but I think they should have a say. They have the lockout right now. As of recording, this lockout's still going on. So they're going head to head with the owners. Hell, you have not saying the game. Fuck it. Put it, have some say in the Hall of Fame too.
Yeah.
But the thing that irks me, fewer than 5% of the ballot, you just cut off, and 10 years, one or the other makes sense, but both, it seems a little overkill.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say the other one though is why is it limited to 10 that you can vote for per year? Because there's times, like you said, like last year nobody got in, and maybe that was fair, but there might be years where there's just an outstanding crop. And if you're saying, well, I can't vote for this guy as a first ballot Hall of Famer because I've got 10 guys ahead of him on my priority list, and I just don't understand the logic behind that.
Yeah, I don't either. That also really irked me. They only have 10 votes. But this year, man stands alone. David Ortiz, 394 total ballots, 296 voted for. So David Ortiz got 77.9% of the ballot, making him a first ballot Hall of Famer. Now, when I saw he was on the ballot, as a Yankee fan, I said, hands down, yes, he is a Hall of Famer. Now, he was only a DH, didn't play half the game, but David Ortiz is a player who is extremely talented, incredibly clutch, the heart and soul of a city and the game, and one of the most well-liked players that I can think of in recent memory. Now, first ballot Hall of Famer, I think borderline. I wouldn't have been shocked if he got in next year, but not this year. But seeing 77.9% of the ballot, I think that's a perfectly fair number for him to get into the Hall of Fame.
Sure. Yeah. I think like you hit on something there that, well, we can touch on this later when we talk about other guys, but likability is such a huge factor. And that's, due in large part to the fact that it's the writers that are voting these guys in or snubbing them. Right.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, man. Should likability take part into getting into the Hall of Fame? Because no, see, I say yes, because it works both ways. I mean, here's why. Like players who are likable, who is a face of the game. Like, yeah, Derek Jeter got like 100% of the votes almost because, yeah, he had the stats to back it up, but he's also super likable. I think it's fair both ways. Like, yeah, Bonds, Schilling's an asshole, right? That's a big reason why he didn't get in. He's an asshole. I'll say it. He's an asshole. But I also think his stats are borderline. So I think it's a little, I think it's a factor you can't ignore because we're human beings. It's impossible to ignore. If computers decided who was in the Hall of Fame, you got a point. But I just don't see it as the end of the world. But please prove me wrong.
Well, no, it's not that I'm saying it shouldn't be a factor. I think it's inevitable that it is, simply because it is humans voting for other humans, and biases always come into things like this, right? It's just like the hiring process. If you're running a business, well, if it's somebody that is your friend or someone you feel a connection with, they automatically get the benefit of the doubt more than someone you don't know. And so it kind of works the same way, although it's a slightly different criteria. But if you like someone, you're much more likely to tick the box next to their name on that ballot. Whereas if you didn't like them as a reporter, or when you were reporting, or as a member of the media, you're probably going to hesitate before you tick that box. It might take you a couple of years to soften up, and time heals a lot of wounds, and it might take a little bit more time, or might take some persuasion from other people. So that kind of makes sense. I get it, but I also don't feel like it's the nice guy Hall of Fame, right? I mean,
yeah.
If you got some outstanding players, you look at like Pete Rose and Barry Bonds, and just look at the numbers and look what they did for the game. Not even numbers, but just look at how they played the game and how they changed the game. And can you say solely on the grounds that you didn't like them or they were jerks that they shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame? Now, obviously, that's not the only factor that has removed them from the talk, but I don't know if that should be the deciding factor.
No, I agree. It definitely should not be the deciding factor. No, I 1,000% agree with that. Yeah, if you're holding a grudge because Barry Bonds called you a jerk and made you hurt your little feels, like, bro, get a new job. Sorry, like, guy should be Hall of Famer. So next year's ballot. Let me pull up next year's ballot. I got the link here. Yeah, it's gonna be riveting podcasting. Trying me how to copy and paste the link. Next year's ballot's going to be interesting. So we have Scott Rowland, Todd Helton, Billy Wagner, Andrew Jones, Gary Sheffield, A-Rod, Jeff Kent, Manny Ramirez, Omar Vizquel, Andy Pettit, Jimmy Rollins, Bobby Abreu, Mark Burley, Torrey Hunter, all returning on the ballot. New people, we got Carlos Beltran, John Lackey, Jared Weaver, Jacoby Ellsbury, Matt Cain, and Johnny Peralta. Now, names on this list, I don't see any of them getting in, to be honest.
The new guys or
overall, the whole list.
Overall.
Wow.
Okay.
I don't see any of them getting in. So let's start with the people returning on the ballot. Starting with, so next year will be Jeff Kent's 10th year on the ballot. Is that right? I don't know if that's true or not. Hang on. I got confused here. Oh, I screwed up. All right, 2023 official ballot. All right, so next year will be Scott Rowland's 6th year on the ballot. This year, he got 63.2. So, Scott Rowland, I just don't see him as a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I don't either.
He's like the most likely. People who should, in my opinion, A-Rod, 1,000% should be a Hall of Famer.
Okay. So I've got maybe a little bit of a hot take on this. But with the whole controversy surrounding players, as far as steroid use and things like that, I think that in a way they kind of made a decision that left them with one of two possible outcomes. And if they can get both, well, good for them. But I don't know if it necessarily, if they merit both. So by using performance enhancing drugs, and I'm not saying that, if you use them, you're automatically out, but you're kind of choosing either better numbers from year to year or eternal fame. And maybe you can't have both. And I think they made the decision by using the drugs. They're saying, okay, well, I'm going to put up some crazy video game numbers, or I'm going to enhance my career in that respect, enhance my salary for the next 5-10 years, whatever it might be. But there has to be a price that they pay for that. So I personally think that if they are known to have used PEDs, and again, I don't know how we can prove this, but if we can, if we would say that the PEDs usage definitely had a positive impact on their numbers to the point that they became elite, then maybe they shouldn't be let in.
Okay. I mean, this is going to be debated in baseball for decades, whether they should or shouldn't be in. Right. I land in the camp that steroids save baseball. Like, hands down, steroids save baseball. Because you had the 94 strike, and then when they came back, baseball wasn't popular. The fans were pissed off. Like, people just were not interested in baseball. No one cared that the owners and the players were bickering about money. It's like, I don't feel sympathy for either of you. You both make millions of dollars, and I'm over here doing a podcast. I don't care about any of your contract disputes. Just play the game, right? You're playing a game, millions of dollars to play a game. You shouldn't be complaining. Like, all of you, shut up. You're acting like children. But what brought them all back was the home run race of 1998 between McGwire and Sosa.
McGwire and Sosa, yep.
Now,
no, I agree with you.
You can say what you can say. Oh, the smaller ballparks, they brought the fences in. They changed the balls a little bit. No, steroids brought people back to baseball. Now, well,
McGwire was hitting those balls 500 feet. So don't tell me that the ball had extra hop, or that the fences did it. Okay, his 60-second home run, it barely cleared the fence, but most of his were in the upper deck.
God, that was so funny. Seeing that 60-second home run just barely gets over the fence in like Oakland or wherever it was. It's just like, man, you're the home run king, and that's the one you break it with. Like, come on now. They were putting up ridiculous numbers, but I do land the camp of saving baseball, and there's certain players who should be rewarded for saving baseball. Now, if you want to make the argument after the fact, after baseball's already saved, like the A-Rod, the Mannies, the Sheffields, hey, David Ortiz, he was caught up in some baseball steroids controversy too. He never got suspended, but he was in the Mitchell report. Yep. He was listed with Manny Ramirez in 2004. You're telling me Manny was taking steroids and got busted, but Ortiz wasn't? Please spare me crocodile tears. But yeah, I think there's a valid argument. I think your point has merit, that you make a choice and your choices have consequences. To me, it's just like, okay, but who wasn't using steroids at that era? Like, there were plenty of people who were using steroids who still put up minor league numbers in the major leagues. You still have to see the ball. You still have to hit the ball. You still have to play the game. You still have to stay healthy. So there's something to that. Yeah, steroids enhance the skills you already have. Barry Bonds is a Hall of Fame player before he took steroids. Even if you wipe out his statistics from the years he took steroids, it's still a Hall of Fame career.
Right. But so if you branch this over to other sports, one of my most crushing moments as a sports fan was the 1988 Seoul Olympics. And I don't know if you remember this, but Ben Johnson against Carl Lewis was the talk of North America. This is before you were born, of course. Ben Johnson, Canadian sprinter, Carl Lewis, of course, the greatest American sprinter of all time, arguably. And they go up against each other, and Johnson just blows him away. And we were just on cloud nine as Canadians. But then the very next day, we found out that he tested positive for anabolic steroids, and that crushed us. And I don't know that he had, that in him before steroids, like if he could have broken records or won gold medals. But if he even let's say in a world where he was already a gold medal sprinter, but then he used the roids and, set the world record in Seoul, I still think it wipes out what he did before, simply because that was a decision he made. He said, you know what, I'm not satisfied with being the best or competing for the best. I'm going to bring myself to the next level by adding this extra substance into my body. And I think, Barry Bonds was in the upper echelon. He might have even been the best player in baseball or pretty close before he started using steroids.
Yeah.
But the question then is, why did he?
That's a great question. To be honest, honestly, he probably wanted a World Series ring. He wanted nothing more than to win that goddamn World Series, and he never got it. The closest he got was 2002. 2002 against the Angels. The Angels beat him. So, I don't know. That's a great question. That's a question only he can answer. Because he didn't need them. A-Rod didn't need them. McGuire, Sosa, they probably needed them, to be honest. Clemens didn't need them.
Yeah.
Gary Sheffield probably need him. It's his 9th year next year. I don't think he gets in. Billy Wagner, I think is possible. I don't think he gets in. Manny, he doesn't get in. Omar Vizquel, his 6th year, I don't think he gets in. The one
ever or next year?
Ever.
Okay.
These are all ever.
Okay.
The one person I think should 1,000% get in is Andy Pettit.
Okay.
I mean,
I don't know him well enough, but as a Yankees fan, I'm sure you know a lot about him, and you could probably make a good case for him.
So Andy Pettit, let's see if I can pull up his stats here. This is batting stats. I don't care about his batting stats. I want his pitching stats. Here we go. Get pitching stats. Andy Pettit. Let's see if he's got the numbers here. Where is he? Where is his line? Andy Pettit. Well, he got 256 wins. 3.85 ERA. How many strikeouts he got? 2,400 strikeouts. So his numbers are borderline. I'll grant you. His numbers are borderline. But Andy Pettit also has the most wins in playoff history. His pickoff move is famous and notorious for one of the best ever. He is incredibly clutch in the playoffs. He has won plenty of World Series with the Yankees and almost with the Astros. I think he's had an incredible career. I am biased because I do love him as a Yankee. He was one of my favorite players.
Right, yeah.
And I think this is a vote for me where personality and like what he meant for the game and the team kind of goes a long way.
Yeah, I can buy that. I mean, I do think he's borderline, and I don't know him as well as you do. But so the 3.85 career ERA kind of stands out as like fairly mediocre to me. But ERA again is one of those numbers that, is it the best measuring stick? No. So we would have to probably crunch some numbers outside of that to determine what that 3.85 actually means. And I'm not prepared to do that. But I don't know. I'm not really sure about him. How many years does he have left?
Oh, that's a great question. Andy Pettit, 5. This will be his 5th next year, and he got 10% this year.
Oh, that's low.
It is very low. Yeah, it's very low. He's also connected to HGH.
Right, yeah.
Him and Clemens on the Yankees and the Astros. So he probably will never get in, but I think his impact on the game outshines his stats. And that's where I'll end it. All right. So that's next year's ballot. I don't think we're going to see a Hall of Fame class for another few years. That's my honest opinion. But hey, I've been wrong before. Hopefully I'm wrong again. All right. I'm going to list off having that conversation on the Hall of Fame, listing off a few players, whether they should or should not be in the Hall of Fame. Are you ready?
Sure.
Barry Bonds, yes or no?
I'm going to say no for the same reason that I gave earlier, that he had to choose one or the other, either and choose the inflated numbers and the greatness from year to year or the eternal greatness. And I think he made his decision.
I'm saying yes, because it's a crime that the home run leader that's not in the Hall of Fame. I don't care if it's cheating. Put an asterisk. I don't care. He should be in the Hall of Fame. Curt Schilling, yes or no?
Man, that's tougher. Was he associated with
I don't think so. To be honest, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think people generally just don't like the guy.
Okay, because by numbers, I would say yes for him. And I understand he is a very, hateable character.
I hate him. I hate you, Curt Schilling, you stupid bloody ass sock. Asshole.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty of hateable characters though that got into the Hall of Fame. I think we live
Cy
in an
Young's
age
in the Hall
where
of Fame.
it's
No,
easier to
Ty
know
Cobb's
that
in the Hall
people
of
are
Fame. Ty Cobb was the epitome of dirtbag.
right. Yeah. So I'm gonna say yes on Schilling.
I'll say his stats are borderline. I'll give him that. Sammy Sosa.
No.
I'll say yes.
I you know what? He had a few excellent, outstanding years. I don't think though that without the Peds, I don't think that he could have done nearly what he did. So no.
I agree with there. I've seen him play on the Orioles. It was bad. But he's one of those people who saved baseball. Mark McGwire.
Wow, is it possible to say no to Sosa and yes to McGwire and justify that? I'm not really sure, but I
no, but I'm not going to fight you.
Okay, so McGwire, like I don't like if you look at his rookie season. Okay, I don't know if he was using pads in his rookie year, that takes a lot of cojones. But he had a really great rookie year, and I mean he had the power before the pads. But again, if I use the same argument as I did with Bonds, then the answer for McGwire has to be no as well, and so it is.
I give him yes because he saved baseball. Roger Clemens.
Well, again, it's pads, but and this is a tough one because he's almost like the mirror image of Barry Bonds in a sense that like his numbers pre steroids were outstanding, unbelievable, definitely on Hall of Fame track.
He had 21 strikeouts in a game without steroids in like the late 80s.
It's crazy. And how many of those Cy Youngs did he win pre-steroids? I think probably at least 3 of them, if not 4.
Most of them.
He won with the Jays. He won 2 with the Jays, and he won 1 with the Astros, right?
He might have won with the Yankees as well.
Yeah.
But well, he won 7 in total, right? That was post.
Yeah. But again, if I'm going to take a hard line on Ped's use, I mean, if he was busted for it or if it's very clear that he used them, then I have to say no. That's not to say that I don't think his numbers warrant it or that he wasn't great before that. I'm just kind of taking that hard stance of like, well, you chose that path. Now you got to live with both the good and bad consequences. So you can't have the year-to-year glory and the eternal glory. You can't have both unless you did things right, and he didn't. Yeah,
you can't have the cake and eat it too. Hey man, I get the argument, but I'm gonna go yes as well. I think the numbers again because he had the numbers before the steroids. So if you want to put an asterisk on it, fine. I think he should be there. A-Rod.
So A-Rod is the same thing, right? I mean, you look at his numbers, you look at how he did as a rookie back in Seattle. He had an outstanding rookie campaign. And then after that, he was absolutely unbelievable. Went to the Rangers. He was great there. Went to the Yankees. He was outstanding there as well. Personally, I don't like the guy, but I definitely think he's got some unbelievable numbers. And yeah, you know what? Like as much as I'm saying no to all these guys because of Peds, if they were to make like a blanket decision and say, you know what, all these guys get in, they all get asterisks next to their name. And if you were to tell me that, like, we're letting them in or we're not using Peds as a measuring stick or as a penalty, then I would say yes to him. Absolutely. I mean, you look at those numbers, you look at the career he had. Yeah. Outstanding player.
I'll also say this for A-Rod. He was punished for steroids. He was suspended twice.
True.
So he didn't necessarily have his cake and eat it too. He had his cake and he got it taken away. So
yeah.
When do you forgive a guy? When is enough enough?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, that kind of leads a little bit into Pete Rose as well, right? Like,
Pete Rose is the last name.
Pete Rose is a different animal.
Pete Rose is the last name on our list. We're going to get to Pete Rose. I'd love to say about Pete Rose. But
okay, so we'll talk about that later then. But no, you're right. I mean, in a sense, like there was a system in place when A-Rod got caught and he paid the price. And yeah, do you hold that over somebody's head forever? Yes or no?
And remember, he was chasing Bonds.
I would say no, except for the fact that he did it again, right?
That's fair. You know what? Touche. That's fair. Yeah. That's fair. He did it twice. You didn't learn anything. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. All right, touche. Manny Ramirez.
Same thing, right? Because he got caught twice as well, didn't he? Or was
he got caught? He got caught a few times.
Yeah.
He just didn't care. I'm gonna go no on Manny. I don't think he has numbers.
I love his numbers and I love what he brought to the game. I find it interesting that he played in Japan and Korea and he was signed to play in Australia as well. As recently as like 2 years ago, but because of COVID, I think, and maybe his own physical condition, he didn't ever get to play there. But the fact that he just loves the game so much that he's playing overseas well into his late 40s. I don't know. It's just a cool thing. It doesn't get him into the Hall of Fame, but I just think it's an interesting thing about Manny.
Fun to watch. He was
Definitely
a great character for baseball. I hate him with all my being. Number 24, the Red Sox, piece of shit. But he was fun to watch. He was a great character. He was silly. Him and Ortiz were a great duo. But I think he was a person who needed steroids to be successful, whereas some other players did not. So I'm going to say no for him.
Sure. Okay.
Gary Sheffield, the chef.
I would say that I don't know his final stat line or anything like that, but I don't necessarily think that he was Hall of Fame in his career.
Famous swing, crazy ass wrist. His biggest accomplishment is over 500 home runs. He was in the 500 club. Other than that, just known as a crazy power hitter and a cannon for a right arm in right field.
Yeah, I mean, 500 career home runs is definitely nothing to sneeze at. There's only a handful of guys that have done that. And so in that respect, well, he was also tied in with was it the Mitchell Report?
Yes.
Or am I wrong?
You're correct.
Yeah. So again, I have to go all or nothing on these. And so if I'm going nothing, I got to go nothing with him as well. But the more we talk about it, the more I'm seeing like how many guys I'm canceling out of the Hall of Fame. I feel like a jerk saying no to all of them. So.
Hey man, it's just your humble opinion. I'm gonna give the X to Gary Sheffield as well. As much as I love the chef, I'm smelling what he's cooking. All right, finally, Pete Rose.
Pete Rose. Yeah, man, that's a really hard one. I honestly, I don't know his career because I never watched him play, live or anything like that. I just know the tale.
He's the all-time hits leader.
Yeah.
He has over 4,000 hits, a crazy career batting average, and he got banned from baseball for betting on himself.
Right. And I think that's probably enough to cancel him eternally, especially because he has never really come out and said that he did it and apologized for it. Or maybe he said that he did, but he didn't apologize. Is that right?
Yeah, I think he had some kind of half-assed apology a year or two ago.
Yeah.
But because I think he wanted to be like a manager or an assistant manager or something. He wanted to be back in the game. Here's the thing of Pete Rose. That's interesting because Phil said the same thing. Phil almost said word for word the same thing you said. I'm going to tell you what I told him. I don't think he has anything to apologize for. He's a jerk. Yes. He's an aggressive player and a garbage human being, from what I've heard. Don't know the guy personally. Right. However, he gambled on baseball. Unlike Joe Jackson in the Black Sox in 1919, he bet on himself to win.
Right.
I don't see the harm in that. I don't see it against the integrity of the game because he's not rigging games. He's playing the game the exact same way, if not harder, than he would if he didn't bet at all.
Right.
So I don't see any negative downside to him betting on himself to win a game or his team. I don't see it. I don't get what all the outrage is for. Is it disrespectful for the game itself? If so, how?
So I think it's the integrity issue though, and it's also the fact that if they forgive this and if they let him off for this, then they're kind of opening the door to other people doing it too, or they're saying, well, you let Pete do it, or you're okay with Pete doing it, so why not me? And it just becomes really gray and it's a slippery slope. And I guess that's the hard line they have to draw.
I guess, but I don't see an issue in morality with betting on yourself to win. Like if you can bet on other sports, yeah, you shouldn't. I mean, you probably shouldn't do it. Yeah, definitely not to make yourself lose. That's blatantly cheating.
Right.
But to bet yourself win, I think it's a victimless crime.
Okay. All right. I mean, I'll grant you that, but I don't know. I mean, I think like his apology in recent years, there's motivation behind it and it may not be sincere. And who am I to be, judge, jury, and executioner on him? It's not my place. And so I'm going to pass on this one.
It was a very whelming apology. But yeah, I'm going to say 1,000%. He deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. You want to plead the fifth? Eh? You're not an American, but I'm going to grant it. You're right anyway.
Thanks.
All right. So our last topic of discussion, I don't know how long we're going to go here, but we're going to see how it goes. ESPN recently had a top 100 baseball players of all time. We're not going to go through all 100 because we have stuff to do. We're going to go through some notables. By notables, I mean about a third of the list. So
sure.
Before we start with that, notable snubs. Jeff Bagwell and Mike Mussina. Both Hall of Famers. Not on the list.
Yeah, I mean, both of those guys had unbelievable careers. I would definitely love to have seen both of them on that list for sure.
I'd put them in like the 80s, early 90s. Like they're not like top 25, top 50, but I would put them.
No, definitely not.
I would put them in the list. Now you look at 50 through 1. Any comments before we actually go through these? Any your thoughts on the list overall? There's a lot of things I agree with on this list. A lot of things that go, man, who came up with this list? They need to be taken out back and shot. Terrible. Terrible.
So first of all, like I'm not really a huge fan of lists like this because I feel like the comparison from era to era is just way too hard to do. And it's totally unfair to a lot of these guys. I mean, like you've probably heard the arguments before, like, well, don't you think that like so-and-so, if he had played back in those days, he would have hit 80 home runs, or if such and such a player from the past would have been in our day, he would have struck out 200 times. There's no way he would have hit that many home runs or whatever, stuff like that. There's so many arguments to be made in that respect. And so how do you measure the greatness of these guys up against each other? I don't even believe in, using the numbers like the ERA plus or ERA minus or, whatever, all the fancy saber numbers. I love that there are so many stats in the baseball world. That's part of what drew me to baseball, but I still don't know that it's a fair comparison that can be made. So I say that as, my precursor to what I'm going to say in all of this, because, like, how can I say, just for example, like Warren Spahn doesn't belong in number 47. Well, how do I know? You know what I mean? Like, aside from looking at his numbers. So, but I would look even at number 49. I don't know. I just personally think the Big Hurt deserves a little bit more love than that. What are your thoughts on that?
Interesting, because I did mention Frank Thomas. I was a little hurt at 49 because honestly, I think it's a little high. Really? I think it's a little high. I saw Jim Tomei at 98 and I got really upset. I was like, all right, Frank, you're going to put Jim Tomei 98, but Frank Thomas number 49. Is it because those commercials he's been doing recently for testosterone? I literally put my notes, put his ass in the 70s. Maybe that's a little too harsh. But listen, Frank Thomas, 500 home runs. He played for the White Sox. I think maybe his whole career. I could be wrong.
It looks like he played for the A's and Jays as well.
A's and Jays. That's why I forgot he was on the Blue Jays. But great career, Hall of Famer. I really like Frank Thomas, but I thought 49 was a little high for him. But I do like you put the caveat of it's not fair to compare different eras. And yeah, that's 1,000% true. It's not fair to compare eras because, yeah, if you put Babe Ruth in today's game, he'd probably be on the bench. That's just the reality of the game it's in. And again, if you put a pitcher back there, and he wouldn't make it a year in the league because they pitch too often. So it works both ways. Again, with these lists, super subjective. Like I'm really mad at this list, but I shouldn't be because it's a list that doesn't really mean anything. But number 100, Barry Larkin. Okay. Interesting choice for Barry Larkin, number 100.
Of all time, though. Yeah.
Of all time. I was like, okay. You got to start somewhere. All right. Barry Larkin, fine. But immediately, Phil Niekro, number 99. Knuckleballer, 300 wins, 3,000 strikeouts. That's low.
Yeah. Really low. Yeah.
Jim Tomei, 98. We already covered that. 94, Bryce Harper. I thought was interesting because he's been around for almost 10 years, I think, but he's got a long way to go in his career. By when they make this list 20 years from now, he'll probably be top 50.
Are they saying though that like if his career were to end today, he would still be in that spot?
That's what I'm assuming.
See, I don't know if he belongs in the top 100 of all time just yet.
That's fair. But I think that's why I put him 94. Because it's like recognizing, listen, this guy, you got to put over some of the guys in today's game. Because if you did a list of 100 people and didn't put any players today, I think it's like, well, why am I watching baseball then?
Right. So what do you think? Okay, so what do you think? How high do you think Harper might be able to go? What do you think his ceiling is on this list if he has another great 10 years, say?
I think his list. I think his height is top 50, no more than top 35.
Okay.
I think he's a great player. He's won a few MVPs already, but I don't think he's going to be breaking any records. I don't think he'll bat 300. I think he'll be a franchise player that was just, was a hype out of high school that paid off.
No, that's a very fair assessment. I was thinking like maybe he could creep into the top 20, but now that I think about it, there's no way. There's no way he could get top 20. I mean, you look at the list of guys that are in there, and I just don't see him exceeding any of them, no matter how good he does in the next 10 years. By
the time he retires, baseball will have been around for like 150 years. Think about that. That's crazy.
That's true.
89, Shoeless Joe Jackson. Hey, I'm just happy he made the list.
I mean, again, I'm not a huge MLB historian. I know the name, and I know that he has got a place in the history of the game. You know, part of it is a dark place, but then, you know, he also was one of the all-time greats. And so, yeah, it's good to see him on that list for sure.
81, Mike Piazza. I just go, LOL Met fans. By Mike Piazza, Hall of Famer, great player, franchise player, also well-liked, very well-respected. 81, it's a good place for him.
Yeah, I would say so as well. I mean, he fits the list, and he doesn't really fit terribly high on the list, but you look at the impact that he made, the length of his career. I don't want to say he revolutionized the catching position, but he was one of the first, you know, in this modern era of slugging catchers. Before him, I can't really think of very many catchers. You know, there might have been just a small handful that were able to hit the ball the way that he could.
That's a very good point. It was him and Pudge, Ivan Rodriguez, were like the two sluggers, but no, Mike Piazza. That's a very, very, very good point. 77, Vlad Guerrero, which is a crime. Vlad Guerrero needs to be in the top 50.
I love that guy.
Vlad Guerrero. I love his son. Like, I love everything about this guy. This guy took a ball in the dirt and put it in the seat. There's a double because hit the ground first, right? That's just something. He could take a ball that is at his eyes and put it over the stadium. You could take a ball from the fence at right field and throw it into the dugout. This guy was just unbelievable. Vlad Guerrero, 77, that's a crime.
I mean, he's a generational talent. You know, when you look at what he did and how he did it, I love the fact that he could hit for power with a high average, with very few strikeouts. And even in his younger days, he was stealing bases like crazy as well. So I think he needs to be higher. We didn't get around to this before, but he was one of my favorite players growing up. Like you said, favorite players all time. I didn't get to that, but Vlad Guerrero would definitely be the guy.
Mine too. When I was playing MVP baseball 2005, he was always my cleanup hitter. I don't care what anyone says. He's my cleanup hitter. Justin Verlander, number 72, also very low for me. I put him in the top 50 as well. I put him probably like 48.
I would say he's probably right where he is. I don't know. Like I would actually have to kind of look at which pitcher ranked ahead and behind him to see if he fit kind of within the pitchers, just because I know that they even said in their rankings it was hard for them to rank the pitchers with the hitters, just because you're looking at two completely different skill sets. So looking at him within the pitchers, I would say maybe that's just about right, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Also, we make the point all time. It is very hard. If they did one from like the past 20 years, like 2000 on, top 100, or if they did it, 1950 to 1999 or whatever they wanted to do. There's so many different ways you could do this list, but yeah, okay. Yeah. It's a valid argument. 69, Ozzie Smith, hilarious, perfect. The Wizard, gotta love the Wizard.
Yeah, I mean,
that was doing backflips at shortstop. All right, guy's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, when you think defense, and especially at that position, there's no other name that comes up except for Ozzie Smith.
Yeah. 66, number of the beast, Cal Ripken Jr. Wow,
shouldn't he be higher?
Yeah, right.
Be higher than that.
The goddamn Iron Man. He played what, 2,000 games in a row, and you put him number 66?
That just seems unfair.
It seems unfair.
Well, and especially like, okay, so now that if I look at this and if I were to say like, okay, who would you rather have on your team over the course of a career, Frank Thomas or Cal Ripken Jr.? I'm going to go with Cal Ripken Jr. 10 times out of 10.
10 times out of 10, every time. I put him top 25. I was on the top 25 as the guy. Maybe not top 25. I get back. I'll put him in the top 40.
Sure. Yeah. I'm okay with that.
63, David Ortiz. I thought that was a little low, if I'm being honest.
That's tricky.
For how clutch he is, how good he was in the playoffs. It's baseball isn't all numbers, man. Sometimes it's character, motivation, and just straight up heart. And David Ortiz has all those better than any player I can match.
No, I can agree with you on that. I mean, like, clutch is practically his middle name. Like, I don't know. I can't think of the number of times that you're thinking to yourself, well, I think it might have been in an article that he wrote in the Players Tribune where he was like, okay, well, I was starting to think, well, if it goes like this and this, then I'm going to be up at the plate in this situation. And if I hit a home run, the game's going to end. And that's exactly what happened. I think it was in the playoffs one year. I don't remember the exact scenario, but
probably
I remember like
he did it 3 times.
Yeah. So, I mean, like the guy it seemed like the table was set for him and he cleared it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He owned it. He cleared it, more often than he didn't. So yeah, I could put him higher on that list too.
But then again, career DH, he didn't play half the game.
True.
I mean, that's a good argument. 55, Reggie Jackson. I think that's about his spot he should be.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, again, I didn't watch the man as much as, say, I watched like Frank Thomas or anything like that, but I would say that they are probably about equal, maybe. I could be wrong. Maybe I would put Jackson ahead of Thomas. So maybe now I'm backing off on my initial take on the Big Hurt. But so you said 55, so that's about in the same ballpark as Thomas. So I'm going to say that's okay.
Thomas is 49. Yeah, I think that's a fair place to put him. Clayton Kershaw, number 52. I think he deserved top 50, barely, like 49. I think he's just off, just a hair. Because Clayton Kershaw is the best pitcher of my generation, hands down.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, he's still a guy that you look to and you expect him to get her done, every time he's on the mound. The way he prepares himself and, how old is he now? Like 34, 5?
If that, right. He's probably exiting his prime.
Right. But he's still going to probably be around for another few years once they get the players on the field again. So I could see him maybe finishing his career top 40.
I agree. Number 46, Ichiro. I thought that was very fair as well.
Yeah. There's certain aspects of his game that I guess you could say are lacking, especially when you're looking at an all-time greats list. Maybe power being one of the only ones, that and, championships. But the guy was outstanding on defense. What did he win? Like 10 straight gold gloves, something like that.
Something crazy. Like,
yeah. And 200 plus hits in 10 straight years. And
his impact on the game. He had 3,000 hits in the US and he started late.
Age 27.
Excuse me? You started your career in the beginning of your prime. You still got 3,000 hits. If you include his career in Japan, he has over 5,000 hits.
I think, he surpassed Pete Rose if you include his NPB numbers. Yeah. And that was another kind of sore spot I had with Pete Rose, was that when he was asked about that, he was like, yeah, but that doesn't count because he didn't do it in the major leagues. I did all of mine in the major leagues. So I'm still the greatest hitter of all time.
Yeah. Okay, Pete.
Even if you think that, man, just have a little bit of grace.
It's okay to think that.
Yeah.
But there's the right way to say things. Because you can't just disrespect an entire professional league of baseball. Like Japan ball, no, it's not the Major League Baseball. You can make the argument that the MLB is better, whatever that means, but you can't discredit that the whole Japanese league of baseball is not professional. They're pros. They're 1,000% professional. And Ichiro is prime example because he came here and almost broke your record.
So, not that this could ever happen, but in a fictional universe, if you put Pete Rose in Japan until age 27, how many hits would he have gotten compared to how many he got in, up until age 27 in major leagues? Would it have been a lot more than he actually got or not? It's hard to say because the pitchers in Japan are actually quite good.
And the ball's different.
Yes. Yeah. So,
everything about the sport's different.
Yeah. I mean, hats off to Ichiro even for making that adjustment. Coming from Japan all the way to America is a huge, physical, mental, everything adjustment. And so to do that mid-career and still excel is unbelievable.
Yeah. We talked Nolan Ryan, I think top 25, number 42, number 41 is Satchel Paige. That's a sin to me, man. Satchel Paige, especially, this guy was one of the best of his era, like hands down. That early stages of baseball, he was unhittable. Do you know anything about Satchel Paige?
I don't. I mean, like I know the name. I've looked up a little bit about him, but any comment that I make would sound very uneducated. So I'm going to go with what you're saying as well.
It's okay, Will. I'm right. You're going to say I'm right. It's totally fine. 39, Yogi Berra. Shocking. I love Yogi Berra, I'm happy he's this high, but if being honest, he should not be number 39.
Do you think his likability comes in with this? Because he was a very likable character, was he not?
His baseballisms, it's like it's 40% physical and like 80% mental. I butchered the quote, but like, yeah, his Yogi-isms. I mean, granted, the guy has like 11 World Series rings as a player and a manager. He's one of the most winningest players of all time in history, baseball history. So, or sports history for that matter.
Yeah.
So I guess if you consider winning, fair. But as terms of his skill and his stats and as a player, I think 39's high.
Okay. Yeah, I could go with that, but I think I don't know how he was as a catcher either.
He's a good catcher.
But it is
very
a very demanding position. And
Yeah.
so that could have factored in a little anyways.
Yeah. You know, catchers, numbers some catchers are taking a hit because they're on their knees all day or crouching all day, and it ruins their knees. 38, Jackie Robinson. I think a touch too low.
Yeah, I would say so as well. I mean, look at the impact that he made on the game.
Yeah.
And that in itself, definitely, you know, but beyond that, the numbers, you know what I mean? Like his numbers are outstanding. And I think he could have been a lot higher on this list than he was. I would have put him maybe top 30.
I would have put him 24 because I think 42 is too low and make it backwards. All right. That's my reason.
There you go.
There you go.
Love it.
Pete Rose, 34. We talked him to death. I think he should be top 15. I'm assuming you think he's a little high.
I don't. In terms of what he did on the field or what he accomplished as a player, no, I wouldn't, because he didn't use any substance that affected his performance or made him a better player. You know, like even the gambling, like you said, if anything, the gambling probably made him a better player because he was putting that money on himself.
Yeah.
But what he accomplished as a player, I would say that he's low. I wouldn't say that he's high.
Interesting. All right. Respect to the game. That goes a long way. 31, Mariana Rivera.
Oh, I mean, greatest closer of all time. And this is a tough one to gauge simply because there were no closers for how many years of baseball's history, right? So
that's a great point. That's a very, very good point. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, but what he did, man, with just that one pitch,
a fastball,
and how long he did it,
a cut fastball.
Yep,
that's all it is. A cut fastball that's literally unhittable.
And you know, look at his playoff ERA. Was it like 0.7 for his career?
Yeah,
in the playoffs.
Yeah,
I mean, just ridiculous. You know, you're talking about Ortiz and his clutch factor. Well, what about Rivera? I mean, the only time that I saw him fail in the playoffs was against the Diamondbacks, and that was kind of, I don't want to say a fluky hit, but it certainly wasn't a clean hit, right?
Yeah, Luis Gonzalez, I don't want to talk about it, but I'm going to talk about it. Honestly, that hurts more than 2004. 2004 hurts because it was the Red Sox, and I was like 10 years old, and it was the worst day of my life the day after they won the World Series. But,
right.
You know, David Ortiz is Mariano's kryptonite. That 0.7 ERA, whatever it is, half that is from David Ortiz. The other one's Luis Gonzalez. Luis Gonzalez, bloop single, 2001. Luis Gonzalez also took steroids. So fuck that guy. But that hurt, especially because it was right after 9/11. You know, that was the one time the whole world, or the whole country at least, wanted the Yankees to win a World Series. The only time ever, now or forever. And Arizona wins. What? Oh, so Schilling was on that team. So that's why I hate Kurt Schilling too.
Oh,
I think Kurt Schilling pitched game 6, that clinching game. So that, or game 7, whatever it was. So
yeah, I
Mariano,
think you're right.
Too low.
Well, and you want to talk about likability factor as well. I mean, who didn't like Rivera, right? He was just one of the nicest guys ever in the game.
Yeah. It's like when he retired, you know, that last season, he did his whole tour, him and Jeter. Like, you know, even Red Sox fans, as fickle and as disgusting as they can be, you know, they tipped a hat to both of them. You know, that they were class acts to a class act. So I love Mariano Rivera. He's in one of my favorite players of all time. But my favorite play of all time is number 28, and that's Derek Jeter. And God damn it, this isn't the biggest crime of the century. I don't know what is.
Where would you have ranked him?
I would have put him top 15.
Oh, wow. I think that's pretty high. I mean, very long career, very excellent career, very good hitter. His defense, I don't know. You could go both ways. I mean, people make arguments both ways on that. I don't know. I mean, you could be right. It's kind of hard to say. I mean, he definitely also he had what, 5 World Series wins? Is that right?
Yeah, 5 or 6. Although I do see that we're going to go through the top 15, and I don't know who I'd replace. So I put top 15 because he's my favorite of all time. But I'm looking at his top 15 and I can't think of anyone to replace him with. Maybe Mike Trout, but that's a maybe.
Right. See, I would have, number 30 was Pujols. I would have put Pujols slightly ahead of Jeter, truth be told.
Okay. I don't want to hear why.
Well, there's some bias there too. I mean, I really like him as well. So
fair enough. All right. 27, Roberto Clemente. Surprised he was this high because his career is cut short because, he died in a plane crash.
Right.
But his last game, he got his 3,000th hit. And then he died going to, I believe, Haiti was the earthquake, or Dominican Republic. I think it was his home country.
Nicaragua.
Nicaragua.
Yeah.
And he died in a plane crash. Tragic. Absolutely tragic. But 27 on the list. He would have been 27 if he played a full career, for sure.
Right. Yeah. But I think, again, like, his name lives on through the award. And I think that may be one of the reasons that he's ranked as high as he is. And I think it's a pretty fair assessment.
Yeah. This list can be a bunch of criteria: impact inside and outside the game. The guy was a humanitarian. So that's got to count for something.
Yep.
26, A-Rod. Okay.
Great
Bold.
Numbers, great career. Again, if are you penalizing guys for PEDs on this list or not? If you're not, I think he needs to be higher.
I think they're not, because Barry Bonds is number 8.
Right.
So they're probably not.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I would probably put A-Rod somewhere around 20 then.
Me as well. Randy Johnson, number 24. Thought that was perfect.
I loved Randy Johnson, and I think this is a great spot for him as well. I mean, just a crazy stretch of years in his prime where, when he figured out control, good luck hitting that guy.
He was also on that 2001 Diamondbacks team. That slider was unhittable. 23, Ricky Henderson. I think that's also perfect. One of the greatest players of all time.
It's tough to argue. Like, we're arguing for a lot of guys being higher, but I would almost say put him higher. His impact as not only a base runner, but a leadoff hitter. And then if you throw in some personality factor, I mean, not everybody liked Ricky Henderson, but he always had something interesting to say. And I love that about him.
All right. 22, Tom Seaver, which I went, ooh, okay. Okay. Tom Seaver, one of the greatest pitchers of all time. See, this is where I think Nolan Ryan probably should. I think I probably would switch Tom Seaver and Nolan Ryan.
Ryan's further down the list, like further.
Nolan Ryan's very much further down the list. Nolan Ryan was number 42.
Okay, yeah, I could swap those two out quite easily. Yeah, I don't know Seaver well enough, or what he did, or how he fit into his era well enough to say. But I mean, I know Nolan Ryan a lot better, and Ryan's numbers are they speak for themselves. Yeah.
Cy Young, number 21. I mean, they named an award after this guy, and I can't give him top 10. Come on now. I'm being serious. Come on now.
There's a reason they named the award after him, and it's not just like, so for example, right, the Japanese equivalent, or what they call the equivalent, is the Eiji Sawamura Award. And this is a guy that died, I think, at age 27 in World War II.
Oof.
Yeah. And they named the award after him because of, well, I mean, he did have an outstanding short career, but also in that barnstorming tour in 1934, he struck out. If I'm not mistaken, it was Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and Jimmy Fox back to back. And he allowed one run. It was a solo shot to Gehrig in a 1-0 loss. That would have been the first time a Japanese team ever beat an American team on Japanese soil, or at least, at that level. And so his spirit, and, of course, the award was named, well, I guess the same would be true of Cy Young after his death. But there's a difference there, right? Like, Cy Young actually had a full career with unbelievable numbers, whereas Eiji Sawamura's career was cut short. So yeah, I agree with you there. Like, you're naming the award after the guy because of what he accomplished and because of what he, I guess, stood for as a pitcher.
And it's always the funny joke. Who's one of the greatest pitchers of all time? Never to win a Cy Young. Cy Young.
Cy Young.
Cy Young. Hilarious. Number 17, Roger Clemens. Okay, I think that's fair.
Yeah, 7 Cy Young awards. Hard to argue with that. And again, if there's no Peds penalty, then I think that's fair.
16, Joe DiMaggio. Jolton Joe. I think that's also fair.
Wow, like 56 straight hits, pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Again, this is a guy whose career I obviously didn't get to follow or anything like that, but certainly, yeah, all the talk, it fits.
If you got a record that's never going to be broken, you deserve to be pretty high.
Yeah, I would maybe swap him and Trout, at least for now, and maybe Trout overcomes him in the next few years, or by the end of his career for sure.
Yeah, top 15. Here we go. Mike Trout. I think he's very high for this list, and I think they only put him in there because he is the face of baseball next to Shohei Ohtani.
Right. And again, this I think is maybe extrapolating on his career numbers, because if you look at, his cumulative stats, he's not anywhere close to anyone else that's in, say, the top 30. So maybe there's a little bit of hope added into this that he will be, like I would say he might even be he could be top 10, if not maybe even top 5, if he continues to have, say 5+ years of greatness. But right. I don't know about 15th right now.
I agree. So we're going to go through the top 14 right now. I agree with all of these picks except for one. I'm going to see if you can pick out what it is. Okay. So 14, Greg Maddux. 13, Ken Griffey Jr. 12, Honus Wagner. 11, Pedro Martinez. 10, Stan Musial. Number 9, Walter Johnson. Number 8, Barry Bonds. Number 7, Mickey Mantle, which, poetic justice. Number 6, Lou Gehrig. Number 5, Ted Williams, excuse me. Number 4, Ty Cobb. 3, 2, 1, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, and of course, Babe Ruth, because obviously. So which one of these doesn't fit on where they are?
Ooh, that's really hard.
If thinking like me, I spoke to Springy for almost like an hour and a half now. Think like me. Who do I go, wow, they don't deserve to be there?
Just looking at this list, I would probably say, you would say maybe Pedro.
No, I think Pedro's actually perfect.
Okay. I do as well. Yeah.
Who's your daddy, man? Come on, the Yankees. Willie Mays. I'm shocked Willie Mays is number 2. Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it. All right. I'm a big fan of the catch and the say, hey, kid, and all that stuff too. But number 2, shocking. Absolutely shocking.
True. Ahead of Hank Aaron is pretty shocking.
Hank Aaron, Ty Cobb, Ted Williams, yeah. Lou Gehrig. If you want to put him number 6, move everyone else down a peg, I think it's a perfect top 10.
Right.
Maybe Griffey for Stan Musial, because I don't know a lot about Stan Musial, but I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt. But I think his top 10 is outstanding.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that you could probably ask, like, you're saying who wrote this list, who did this. You could probably ask a dozen, you could ask 2 dozen guys to name the top 10 of all time, and you'd probably get at least 8 to 9 of them exactly the same on all those lists.
Yeah. Maybe just in a different order, depending on their fandom.
Right.
But yeah. They're all in the list. Ruth, Aaron, and Cobb are probably your top 3 in one way, shape, or form.
Right.
But yeah, that's the 100. Honus Wagner. I'm glad Honus Wagner is number 12. The tiny baseball card. Griffey. Yep. If Griffey didn't get injured all those times, he'd probably be number 5, to be honest. But
oh yeah,
the injuries just put him down. Greg Maddux, I still think is an underrated pitcher, which is crazy to me because he's one of the greatest of all time. His precision. I saw a crazy stat the other day. It's like he pitched like 5,000 innings, all these strikeouts, and he only had a 3-0 count like 100 times in his career, or 130 times.
Wow.
Something absolutely ludicrous. And it's like, no, that's Greg Maddux for you. He was just unhittable.
So he blew my mind when as a young baseball fan that didn't fully understand the game. And I remember reading a quote from him that said, the job of the pitcher is to make the balls look like strikes and the strikes look like balls. And I was like, oh yeah.
Wow.
Light bulb goes off. I was like,
yeah, that is exactly right there. It. That's great.
Yeah, but that's what he did. That's what he did better than anybody else.
Unbelievable. And I think that's a perfect way to cap off this list. All right, Trevor, I had a great time talking with you. Is there anything
Likewise.
else we didn't cover? Anything you want to ask me? Are you ready to go home, man? I don't know what time it is in there in Japan, but it's probably early in the morning.
It's lunchtime, actually. Yeah.
Lunchtime. Oh, look
Yeah.
at you. It's 10 o'clock
Yeah.
at night here in New Jersey. It's almost bedtime. But Trevor, I loved having you here. It was great talking to you. I'm glad we could connect, talked about baseball. This was a lot of fun for me. This is why I love podcasting, man. It's a great load of fun. Anything you want to plug, anything you want to say, anything you want people to shout out, the floor is yours, where they can find you, your socials, your podcast, anything you want to say. Go right ahead.
Yeah. So check me out. As far as my website goes, it's thehanshintigers.com. So basically the team name with the in front of it. And you can find all my socials there if you just go into the about section of that. This is a perfect time, I honestly think, for American fans to kind of latch on to Japanese baseball. I don't know how long the lockout is going to last, but one of the things I love about the Japanese game, and you can take this in different ways, right? I understand the Players Association is fighting for not only their own rights, and they're not fighting for their extra millions of dollars. I think they're really fighting for the little guys, right? The rights of the players that are fringe, that, need the extra benefits, because the lower level of the game is going to get absolutely squelched if something doesn't change. But NPB very seldom has labor disputes or arguments. The players are very likable just as people. We talked a lot about these guys that are just, disgusting people or unlikable or whatever. I haven't met a single Japanese player that I didn't like. It's a very pure game here. I would say give NPB a chance. Check out japanball.com as well. That is the site that I write for as a newsletter writer. That is the tour that comes to Japan. So I would say check that out. Check me out on my website and then my socials. And give Japanese baseball a chance. I think you would love it if you caught on and chose a good team like the Tigers.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, now it's my turn. I always do this at the end of the podcast. You love it, and let's see if I can do it all in one breath. That's usually how I do it. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Will Tarashuk. This has been a Talking with Tarashuk. I'm not going to do it in one breath. I can't do it. This has been a Talking with Tarashuk podcast with my guest, Trevor Raichura. Trevor, I had a great time talking with you. Baseball is my first love. It's also my second love and my third love. Podcasting is my fourth love. I hope to bring you back sometime mid-season. Maybe me, you, and Phil can do a conjoined thing at the All-Star break down the season, see what's going on. If there is a season, here's hoping. We didn't tell with the lockout this time because we're recording this in February, and by the time it's released in mid-March, hopefully the lockdown's over. I didn't want anything to be irrelevant. But my name is Will Tarashuk. T as in Thomas, Arashuk. This has been Talking with Tarashuk. Find me anywhere and ever a podcast can be found. Make sure to like, share, subscribe on YouTube. Support the show. If you want to be a guest, talk about baseball or anything you find interesting, if you make me go, ooh, that's interesting, congratulations, you are on the show, on video, with these bubbles, with my face in the bottom right corner. Anything you want to talk about, as long as I go, ooh, we'll talk about it. And it's fun. It's a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun. AmbiguousPodcastSolutions.com to find all of our other guests, including Phil Riccobono, some of my old friends from college, writers, authors, life coaches, anything and everything can be there. AmbiguousPodcastSolutions.com. We'll be back next week talking with, I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet. We'll see, but I'll see you there because that's the fun and joy of podcasting. Until then, y'all take care.